Hello and welcome to 302 CDE. This is Richard Lane, the module leader from Coventry University, and today we're going to be looking at an introduction to box modelling using 3D Studio Max. So first of all, we'll have a quick look around the interface of 3D Studio Max. We have on the right hand side here, these are the basic objects that we can put in a scene, and then along the top side here we have our render options up here, we have a material editor. We have some options here that we don't need to worry about just at the moment, and then the ones that we do need to look at are our move, rotate and scale. These will be some of the key options that we'll be looking at throughout the time in modelling on this session. So today we're going to be creating an aeroplane, okay, and the technique we're going to use is called box modelling because it derives from when you create a box in the scene, as we've done there, and you can modify that box to try and make up a shape different from that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be only a box, it can be any primitive shape to start with. And as we're making an aeroplane, the best primitive shape to start with is a cylinder. So what we're going to do is we're going to select cylinder on the right hand side and we're going to draw it on our left screen. This is what we call an orthographic viewport. We have a 2D representation of 3D space in these screens that we can see here. And then we also have our perspective screen here, which will give us an overview of what we're looking at. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by drawing in my left screen here. I'm just going to draw myself a cylinder. So I'm holding down my left mouse button, and then I'm releasing to be able to give the cylinder some length, like that, and then I click again once I'm happy. Okay, so we can see here we've got a cylinder. And this gives us the basic shape of a fuselage of an aeroplane. And the idea with box modelling is we start with one shape that gives us the very basics of what we want to create. And now what we need to do is we need to think about what areas of an aeroplane there are. So obviously there's wings at the front and at the rear of the plane. We also have a cockpit, and we've got to make room for an engine as well. So what I'm going to do is, with this in mind, I'm going to think about how many segments I'm going to need. So I'm just zooming in here on the top screen here using the mouse rolling button. Okay, so I'm just getting to the point where I can see it. And you can see down here I have height segments of 5 and cap segments of 1. I want to adjust this to height segments of 7 and cap segments of 3. So you can see the end will change when I do this. And this gives us enough options to be able to get the various parts of the plane to the way we want them to be. So now all we have here is a cylinder with a number of sections, but we will not be able to edit this geometry. We won't be able to change the shape. So what we're going to do, we're going to right click on the model and then I'll convert to an editable poly. It's extremely important that we choose editable poly here, as we won't have the options that we require later on. So there we go, and you'll notice now this whole menu on the right hand side has changed, and all of these options are to do with this shape. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to maximize my top screen here, which I do with the button at the very bottom right hand corner of the software, and we're going to start to shape this into our aeroplane. So I've selected vertex, which are the dots you can see here. Our other options are edges, which are the lines that go between, and then we have border, which we don't need to worry ourselves with too much at the moment, which will select the border around an object, and then we have polygon, and these are the blocks in between. We also have element here, which will select all of the polygons within the scene. So the ones we want to concentrate on for our modelling are vertex, edge and polygon. We can also select these at the top here under editable poly. So vertex, edge, polygon. So we're going to select vertex, and we're going to use the marquee selection, which is holding down the left mouse button on the mouse, and then hovering over and then letting go. And you can see that it's selecting the lines of vertices that I am selecting. So now we're going to think about modelling our plane. And to do this, we've got to think about the various different parts of the plane. So we're thinking this will be the front of the plane. I think this area here will be the front of the cockpit. And I'm going to move these around using the move tool. So I'm going to select that from the top toolbar. And then I'm going to move along the x-axis here. So I think my cockpit's going to start there. My cockpit will finish here. Then my wings will start here. So I'm just going to move those to just behind the cockpit. My wings will finish just at the back here, and then I'm going to select these two options here to make my tail plane. Okay, so I've now compartmentalised my model into all the various elements I want to create. And it's a very key point in 3D modelling. If you plan ahead, you'll find that you get a lot better models in a much quicker time than if you just go ad hoc and try and do whatever you can do. So please try and think ahead of what your model will require. So what I'm going to do now is get the cigar-shaped scaling for a model done. So I'm going to select the scale tool. I'll select the very front of my plane. I'm going to scale this right down like this. And I think this is the start of the cockpit, so I'm just going to scale it down slightly. This is the back of the cockpit, and now I'm going to start to taper away so we end up with that nice cigar shape of a plane fuselage. There we go, and then we're going to continue back. And there we go. So we've got that lovely cigar shape now to create the basic shape of the fuselage of the plane. If we select the bottom right again, I can now see all of my viewports, and you can see in my perspective view we've got the basic shape of the plane. So if I use the steering wheel tool at the top right of the screen, I can rotate around this and have a look at it. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what we're going to work on next is creating the wings for the plane. And to do this, I'm going to select the polygon tool, and then I'm going to click away into empty space just to get rid of all of my selections. And I'm going to select on my left hand side of the plane first. I'm going to select a wing, then I'll rotate around. I'm going to hold control, and I'm select on the other side. And you can notice that we've got even selections on both sides here. So we can see that I'm selecting the same polygon on both sides of the plane, and that's very important. If you don't do this, you'll end up with wonky wings, and the plane I don't think will fly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to scroll down in the selection options, and we're going to select the extrude option. And the extrude option will make new geometry from the same size of the selection that we already have. So instead of clicking the extrude button, I'm going to select the settings option just next to it. And you'll notice when I do this, the extrude polygons option comes up on my main screen, and you'll notice that I've got these new polygons. So my choices here, I could just extrude these all the way out to create my wings, but that will not give us enough polygons to be able to create a suitable curve for the wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in slightly, and then I'm going to push the plus button twice, like that. And this gives us the same shape of wings, but we have these extra polygons. These will enable us to be able to shape the wings much, much better. So now I'm happy. I'm going to click the tick button. And now I'm going to convert over to vertex. I'm just going to make the top view full screen. And I'm going to think about sweeping these wings back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use the marquee selection while holding the left mouse button down to select the wing tips. It's important that you get the top and the bottom of the wings with this, so I'm holding control to make sure my selection goes over both wing tips. And then I'm going to select something called soft selection. And soft selection allows us to have the selection strength weaken the further away the selection we are. So this is best demonstrated by turning it on here. And you can see we've got these orange areas, and these are the areas that are going to be affected if I move the object. But if I change my fall off here and I raise this, you can see this moves down the wings. So I'm going to want to get to the point where it's just at the end of the wings, but not on the fuselage. And now I'll move over to my move tool, and if I just go along the x-axis, we create a nice sweep in the wings. I'll just turn the soft selection off, and there we go. I've got that nice shape of the wings, very, very simply. So now we've finished with the wings, we need to concentrate on looking at the rear of the plane, where we have two small wings at the back and the fin. So again, we're going to use polygon selection. So I'm going to select either side by holding control to be able to make multiple selections. And I need to test here if they're even on both sides, which they are. And then I'm using the bevel tool this time, which is slightly different to the extrude tool. With the extrude tool you get a 1-to-1 ratio from the selection to the new geometry, whereas with the bevel tool you have the same options to be able to increase the length of your new geometry, but you can also adjust the size of the end piece of the new geometry as well, so we can have a much more tapered edge to the wing, just like that. And then if we click tick, and then we can sweep this back slightly by moving on the x-axis. And we can do exactly the same thing on the top of the model as well. So we'll just make sure we've got no other selections by clicking away into space. Select the top, check we have the central polygon, which we do. Then I'm going to use the bevel tool once again. So I can just raise this up slightly, tick because I'm happy, and then we'll just sweep back on the x-axis. And there we go. So far we've only used 3 main tools. We've used the extrude tool to bring the wings out, we've used the bevel tool to create the tail planes and the fin, and we've also used soft selection for shaping the wings. We're going to continue using those same tools, we're going to apply them in a slightly different way now to get some slightly different effects. So let's work on the cockpit area of the plane. So I'm going to keep the polygon selection on, and I'm just going to select 3 polygons on the very top. You can see there I've not actually managed to do that quite correctly, so I'm just going to deselect that one by holding the Alt button and clicking, and select this one there. And now I can see on the top left screen that I have got an even distribution of polygons. Then I'm going to select the bevel tool again, and what this has done is created a new piece of geometry which is in the same settings as we used in the tailplane. And you can see I've accidentally here had the tailplane selected at the same time, so I'm just going to cross this off, click away into space, and then I'm going to select those 3 polygons again. There we go. Select the bevel tool, and I bring this down, and I can also tighten up the top there as well. Fantastic. So what we can do now is we can do a little bit of actual editing of this area as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select my vertex tool, and then I'm going to do a marquee selection over the vertices at the top of the cockpit, and then clicking into my perspective screen I can pull these down and pull them forward slightly. Then I can select the front of the cockpit, and I can pull these back slightly to increase the rake of the cockpit. So there we go, I'm reasonably happy with that. And see now we've got the vast majority of the plane already modelled. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a little bit of work on creating ourselves a jet engine at the front here. So I'm going to select this central vertices, and this is why we created the 3 cap segments at the front here, to give us the ability to manipulate this area. So I'm just going to drag out on the x-axis like that, and that gives us the central rotating cylinder at the front. Then we're going to select the edge axis, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select an edge here, then I'm going to use the loop option, which would select all the way around this circle here. So go loop, and then we'll just pull this out on the x-axis, and then we'll use our scale tool. And when using the scale tool, it's important to select the inner triangle rather than these outer ones here, because the inner triangle will give us a uniform scale, whereas if we select any of these, it will give us a non-uniform scale and create a pinched look, as you can see there. So I'm just going to go Control Z, and then I'm just going to bring that in there. Okay, great. So if we wanted to add a little more detail to this, we could do things like select these edges again, and let's loop around, and then we could use a tool called chamfer. And chamfer will allow us to convert one line into multiple lines, and this will give us a much nicer edge, so we don't end up with that really sharp edge. So you see when I hover over the area, the selection icon changes, and if I hold down my left mouse button I can just drag like that, and that one line becomes two. And there we go. That is our first 3D modelled plane. If you've managed to do this and you've got some time to spare, you can think about creating the exhaust exit out the back. You could also think about improving the look of your jet engine to try and add more detail and add some blades there using the bevel tool. You can also experiment with shaping the wings a little bit better to give them a much more rounded edge, and just adding extra detail to the plane. So that concludes session 1. Thank you.